So, you want to take the weakest subclass in Terraria and do this. Or perhaps this. Well, all that and more is possible thanks to the supposedly well-balanced and vanilla-friendly Thorium mod. Provided you're happy to spend hours optimising your build, farming for rare drops, tier-skipping resources with jellyfish tech, and searching the entirety of your world on the off chance that you find some spacebars just one boss before you'd unlock a plentiful supply of them. Your quest for ultimate sentry power won't come easily though, which you'll quickly learn as you awake unarmed in a master mode world. Needless to say, you're going to want to find yourself a weapon as soon as possible, and there are two candidates for this. First, you can try your luck at finding mining potions throughout the world. Then, hope to get even more lucky in finding the Aether biome where you can decraft these into the antlion mandibles required to craft the antlion staff. Your second option unfortunately also requires a lot of luck, this time with the fishing variety. If you manage to make it to the ocean without being killed, you can cast your rod into the deep blue for a small chance at catching the elusive spitting fish. I'd recommend going for the latter, as you'll likely want to collect both eventually, and having some way to deal damage will make getting the antlion staff a lot easier. Once you reel one in, you can test it out on the nearby population of vultures before realising this has one massive, glaring flaw. It can only be placed inside water. Because of that, you grab a bucket of the stuff on your way to the underground desert before being swiftly sent back to spawn by an unfortunate caccident. And while trying to get back to the desert, you're ambushed by the moon turning bloody and eldritch horrors rising from the dead. But this is all part of the plan. You see, by boarding up your doors and causing a slight bit of water damage to your porch, you can deploy your fishy fiend against the hordes of the undead, which it takes down with ease thanks to its highly damaging spit. In fact, this spit is so damaging that it even manages to take down the patchwork mini-boss, granting a random zombie in the world full sentience and hence making it very confused about life, death, and exactly where he falls on that spectrum. You might be best building a house for him to keep him on the side of the living. We'll follow up on that a little later, as now that the blood moon has passed you can take some of the blood you collected to a nearby demon altar to craft the soul stone, granting 10% increased summon damage at the cost of 20 max health. You can then return to your main quest of crafting the antlion staff by slowly and methodically taking down enemies in the desert for their mandibles. Once you've collected 4, you can combine them with some sand to make your first universally placeable sentry, which you'll quickly find is actually very disappointing damage-wise and want to upgrade immediately. Before you can do that however, the confused zombie we talked about earlier turns up at your house looking to sell you some weird heart thing that apparently belonged to a necromancer. This may come as a slight culture shock to those of you that have never met a zombie before, but it's meant in good faith. Equipping it reduces your regeneration by 20%, but allows you to place down an additional sentry, so that's kinda neat. Now is also a pretty good time to make some armour, and by that I mean that the best time to make armour was right at the start of the playthrough, with the second best time being now that you've remembered. I'd recommend trimming a branch off a nearby tree and using its leaves to make some living tree armour for an additional 2 summon damage. This will help take down some of the more dangerous enemies in the underground jungle that you'll need for your next sentry. Use the spitting fish when water is available and the antlion staff everywhere else to gather up 4 vines and 2 stingers while harvesting 12 jungle spores from the ground. Then combine these at an anvil to make the creeping vine staff. With this, you can summon your own little man-eaters attached to a ball of jungle grass to latch onto nearby enemies, finally giving you the firepower you need to take down the goblin army. After this, search the caverns for the goblin tinkerer and start combining some of your accessories. Congrats, you're almost ready for your first boss, but there's still one more sentry you can collect. At the bottom of the ocean and the jungle side of the world you'll find the aquatic depths biome. This is intended to be explored after taking down the Eater of Worlds or Brain of Cthulhu, as the marine blocks it's made of need a nightmare pickaxe or better to be mined. Just because that's what's intended, doesn't mean you need to listen though. By standing at the bottom of the ocean, you'll be considered inside the aquatic depths, allowing the enemies from it to spawn and granting access to the items they drop. One such item is the nanoclam staff. This thing only drops at a 1% chance from the somewhat rare gigaclams though, so I'd recommend settling in for the long haul by creating an air bubble. And there it is, your very own baby clam generator. With this, you now have every pre-boss sentry, so it's time you take on your first real challenge. You might want to start with the first boss in vanilla, King Slime, or maybe the even easier Grand Thunderbird added by Thorium, but I'd recommend skipping all that and going straight for the Queen Jellyfish, as doing so will set you on a path to unlocking Hellstone before the Eater of Worlds. That's right, Calamity isn't the only mod with tier skips. Since this is your first boss fight of the playthrough, you'll probably want to test out all of your different sentries before very intentionally dying near the end. You know, just so you can gather some research for the proper attempt. For that one, I'd recommend using a combination of the Spittin' Fish and Nanoclam Staff. With the Queen defeated, you'll now be able to find Aqualite bars in strange crates. But to get the strange crates, you'll first have to also take down the Eye of Cthulhu, which the baby clams can do quite easily. With that done, your next challenge is to resist the growing urge to download every so-called quality of life mod on the browser, while you enter perhaps the most grindy part of the run. Your main goal here is to obtain 12 Aqualite bars from strange crates, with the side goal of finding at least 20 meteorite bars from chests near the underworld. Both of these tasks can be very slow and monotonous if luck isn't on your side, so this is also a good time to build some more housing, complete some fishing quests, and take down a few of the skip bosses. Eventually, you'll find your 20 meteorite bars which you can use to craft the Astro Suit, a chest piece that grants 1 extra sentry and a minion slot which you'll keep empty for the entire time it's used. You may even find enough meteorite bars to craft 1 or 2 more pieces of Astro Armour, but these provide only minor boosts, so don't spend an eternity looking for them. It's then back to the fishing grind again, where you'll hopefully get 2 rolls for Aqualite back to back just like I did. If so, then use these bars to craft a Hydro Pickaxe, which comes with an 80% pickaxe power and therefore allows you to mine Hellstone. After gathering some of this, you'll want to smelt it down and craft a lava-proof bug net, because if you thought the fishing grind was over, you clearly picked the wrong challenge. You can also craft the Infernal Animator now, a sentry that summons this little guy with a sword that has basically zero range. If you were paying attention to the intro, then you'll know that this is a small price to pay. Take that lava-proof bug net you made down to the underworld and start catching some critters with it. These can be quite rare, but building some housing should trick them into thinking it's safe to come out. Once you have a decent amount of lava bait, it's time to continue the fishing grind once again. But this time you're looking for something much more common called the Flaming Crack Gut. This fish can be stuffed into a bottle of water with some blink root to make an artillery potion, which grants you your 4th sentry slot. It's worth remembering that at this point in vanilla, you'd still have just 1 sentry slot and 0 sentries to fill it, so you're doing pretty well for yourself. You're not quite happy with just pretty well though, so you go to your underground jungle and clear out an arena for the Queen Bee. You don't need to go quite as big as this, but it might help later against Plantera too. Before fighting her, make sure to craft the Falconeer's Cane, a tool that summons a single, stationary falcon with an aura around it. While inside this aura, your summons have a 1/3 chance to deal 10% extra damage. This works out to be around 3% extra damage, so nothing crazy. It is free though, so you may as well use it. With the Queen Bee defeated, you want to make sure you have enough housing for the Witch Doctor to move in. While waiting for this, you can mine out a bit of an arena in the underground corruption, but please note that due to how absurdly overpowered you're becoming, this is entirely unnecessary. When the Witch Doctor arrives, you want to buy a pygmy necklace from him. You can then combine this with your Soulstone and Necromancer's Heart to make the Necrotic Skull, an accessory that really makes you wonder where Thorium got its reputation for being a balanced mod. This thing gives 10% summon damage, an extra minion slot, an extra sentry slot, and makes your summons deal an additional 2 damage for a short time after killing an enemy. Oh, and did I mention that you can also stack this with its downgrades? This means you now have access to not 2, not 3, not even 4, but 5 times as many sentries as you'd have in vanilla. Seriously, you're not even a fully powered summoner right now. You could also have 5 or 6 minions running around while whip stacking to increase your damage even further. This is but a fraction of the true potential a summoner has in Thorium. You went into this playthrough looking for a challenge, and sure, it is a challenge, but not for you. No, this run is a challenge for any creature dumb enough to stand against you. Even with one arm tied behind your back, they crumble at your mere presence, begging for mercy. This is the true Sentries Only experience. This is Engineer Gaming. You're just getting started though, as defeating the Eater of Worlds unlocks not just the Old One's army, but also access to another 3 sentries added by Thorium. First is the Devourer Staff, crafted from the Eater's remains. It has decent damage and even a bit of homing, but you can find something better. The next one requires a trip to the underground jungle to take on a flower with an attitude. No, not that one. I'm talking about the corpse bloom. This mini-boss drops a sentry called the Weed Eater, which summons a flower that is legally distinct from the pea shooter from Plants vs Zombies, or so I'm told. Again, this is a pretty good option, but there is a better one. If you're lucky enough to find the rare hag out in the wild, kill it. This fulfills a contract with the tracker NPC from which you can now buy a sentry called the Totem Collar. Well, I say a sentry, but really it's 4. You see, Thorium saw what Vanilla did with the Tavern Keep sentries and decided 4 slots for 4 weapons was a little inconvenient, so crammed them all into one. Right-clicking the item switches between the different modes that each have a unique attack. First is the Fiery Totem, which acts a lot like the Flame Burst sentries from Vanilla, firing a fiery ball of fire that inflicts on fire. Next up is the Grounded Totem, acting a lot like the Explosive Trap sentry but worse, as it can only deal damage when placed on solid tiles, and the damage isn't even that good. Right-clicking again will toggle the Windy Totem, which releases tornadoes that travel a short distance, hitting any enemies in their path. Lastly, the Misty Totem will launch 5 water balls in an upward arc around the totem, allowing you to cover quite a large area. For single targets, I'd highly recommend the Fiery Totem, and for larger groups, whichever you prefer of the other 3. The sheer utility provided by this one item means you can retire all the other sentries that have been taking up your precious inventory space. Speaking of space, it's about time you finish your spacesuit, and thankfully, a meteorite should now be available to do so. The full set gives a chance of releasing a burst of damaging plasma each time your summons deal damage, which, thanks to all your sentries, happens quite a lot. With that, you're all set to take on the Old One's army. Hopefully by now you've already found the Tavern Keep, but if not, then grab a Warmonger potion and Battle Potion to increase spawn rates, and head to the Aether biome. The layout of this makes it quite easy to see most mobs that spawn, which should help massively in finding the unconscious man. Once you've got him, buy the Eternity Crystal stand and some Eternity Crystals, along with a rod or 2 for the event itself. This should be a pretty easy battle with the amount of firepower you're packing, but the upsides from it are massive. From the Dark Mage you can get the War Table for a free extra sentry slot, along with either the Squire Shield or Hunter's Buckler for another slot, and 10% summon damage. At this point you may be struggling to keep up with how many sentry slots you have, so let me break it down for you. First, you've got your default sentry slot, followed by a second from the Artillery Potion and a third from the War Table buff. You get a fourth one from your Astro Suit, a fifth from the Squire Shield or Hunter's Buckler, a sixth from the Necrotic Skull, and if you want, you can even get a seventh by stacking this with its downgrade, the Necrotic Heart. In Vanilla, you'd be stuck with just 3 slots from now all the way up to your first mech boss. Anyway, how about we get you an 8th and 9th slot before hard mode? All you have to do is take down Skeletron, an absolute breeze with damage numbers like that. Then in the dungeon start collecting some water candles, spikes, bones, and any Darksteel ingots you can find. Oh, and if you see an ominous looking mirror, make sure you go and touch it to unleash the spirit trapped on the other side of it. This is a really easy mini-boss that you can take down in a matter of seconds, and it barely even has any attacks, so you can just sit back and let your sentries do the work. Okay, yeah, maybe I lied a little there, but you probably wouldn't have thought it if I told you how dangerous the hidden second stage would be, so really I was only lying to help you. Plus, you didn't even come that close to death. You need to stop exaggerating all the time. Gaslight? Now you're getting confused. This is a water candle. There's no gas in it. Once you've calmed down, you'll see that taking down the Illusionist has rewarded you with the Scrying Glass, an accessory which grants, you guessed it, another sentry slot, along with allowing you to toggle an increased range of view like the Sniper Scope or binoculars. Take this and any of the other items you've gathered home, voluntarily or otherwise. There, you can turn your water candles into spirit droplets, your bones and spikes into Darksteel, and then combine the 2 of them to make Spirit Trapper armour. With this and the Scrying Glass, you should now be up to 9 total sentries, triple what you'd have in Vanilla at this point, and already 50% more than an endgame Vanilla Summoner. This is about as good as it gets until post-Golem in regards to sentry slots, but that doesn't mean there aren't other upgrades to be made. In fact, you should have found one of these already in those locked dungeon chests, the ironically named Strongest Link. Put this in your storage system and forget about it. Instead, craft the Strange Skull, a much better sentry that shoots laser beams at nearby enemies. After building a small arena in a granite cave, you can use either this or the totem collar to take down the granite energy storm, which will hopefully drop you the boulder probe staff. When testing this out against the Eye of Cthulhu, make sure to get really confused as to why it's barely ever hitting the boss before realising it's following your cursor, which you've largely been ignoring during boss fights. This little quirk of the boulder probe staff makes it play very differently to other sentries, with the main change being that you can't blame its poor aim for missing shots. It's your fault now. Defeating the buried champion doesn't give any bonuses to sentry summoners specifically, but it does give a nice set of wings, so it's worth doing. These should hopefully make it a little easier to take on the next boss, the Star Scouter. But it's still quite the challenge regardless. In fact, it may even kill you a few times before you destroy it. And even then you only have a small chance of getting the drop you want, so you may have to take it down a few times. The item you're looking for is called the Distress Collar, a weapon that summons a little UFO sentry with a piercing death laser below it. As you could imagine, this thing does pretty good damage against targets with multiple segments, especially if you stack, 9 of them on top of each other. Well, at that point the main thing holding back your damage is the use time of the weapon and the amount of mana you have left, neither of which come anywhere close to stopping you from decimating the wall of flesh. Unfortunately, this is where your power trip must come to an end, as early hard mode in this challenge is quite the chore. You could go take down some spiders to craft the Queen's Spider Staff, but that's a vanilla weapon, which everyone knows is heavily frowned upon in a modded playthrough. Instead, head to your local glowing mushroom biome and die to at least one mycelium mimic. More deaths may work, but this is untested. This lulls the mimic into a false sense of security and allows you to take it out on your next encounter, which should hopefully net you the fungal cane, a sentry which fires a burst of 5 spores at enemies above it. This is pretty good against slower enemies, but for the faster ones, you'll want to head back to the underworld and take down as many molten mortars as you can find. These are pretty rare enemies, and the item you're after has only a 5% chance of dropping. But hey, you've already spent around 16 of your 20 hours of playtime so far grinding rare items, so what's another 1 or 2? When you eventually do get the drop you need, quickly die to the wall of flesh that just spawned before returning to collect your mortar staff. Like the name suggests, this sentry shoots a line of molten magma into the sky that then comes down upon the nearest enemy. This makes it very effective against the first few bosses of hard mode, but before that you'll need to make a choice. The Falconer's Cane you've been using to boost your damage is now getting quite old and it's time to retire it. Thankfully, you have 4 new replacements to choose from. First is the Battle Banner, which increases all summon damage by a flat 5. Then there's the Combat Banner, which increases damage reduction by 3% for each minion slot you have. A much better survivability option for you might be the Morale Banner, which gives all summon attacks a 1 in 5 chance of healing the player for 1 life. Lastly, there's the Power Banner, which increases your nearest sentry's damage by 50%. Whatever your choice of banner, take it to the underworld and use it against the Fallen Beholder, which holds the key to your next sentry. Using the Void Heart it drops along with some Souls of Night and either Ebon or Shadewood, craft the Void Lance, a fast-firing sentry with a somewhat small range. Its main advantage though is the fact that its attacks home into nearby enemies very quickly, meaning it barely ever misses. Now that you've got it, it's time to not use it at all against the next boss. Instead, grab your Fungal Cane and summon the Destroyer. The piercing spore clouds absolutely shred this boss, but surprisingly not as much as the pre-hard mode Distress Collar, which remains incredibly effective even against a mech boss. With your essentially free mech kill, it's time to get some more upgrades. First is the Airstrike Shield, crafted from the Destroyer's drops. This is not a sentry, nor is it an accessory or armour piece. It's actually a tool that when held over the player will reduce your damage taken by a flat 15. Yeah, I don't really know what the Thorium devs are smoking either. That's not all though, as defeating a mech also unlocks tier 2 of the old one's army. So grab a new Tavern Keep sentry and take down an ogre or 2 until you have enough defender medals for a full set of armour. With all the options available from the Tavern Keep, it can be quite difficult to decide which to buy. It's the Squire set. It's always been the Squire set. At this point, the Steampunker can also move in, which unlocks another new sentry accessory. With 25 cogs, you can upgrade a gold or platinum watch into a Steamkeeper watch. This increases summon damage by 10%, along with making sentries last forever and gain an additional 15% damage over the course of 2 minutes. Essentially, it acts as a 25% damage boost if you place your sentries early enough. Defeating any mech also unlocks a new weapon in the Spiritualist's shop, the Aeon Staff. Only one of these sentries can exist at once, with it blowing away enemies in front of it and summoning homing orbs to attack them. Using all your new upgrades, you can easily take down Queen Slime a few times to grind for the Gelatinous Pillion mount, which will allow you to use all your OP accessories while still having excellent mobility. This should allow you to take down both the Twins and Skeletron Prime on the same night, and without any more upgrades other than some life fruit, you're already moving on to Plantera. Defeating Plantera stirs up a new foe in the aquatic depths, but before you handle that, I'd strongly recommend buying some nanites from the Cyborg and crafting the Rude Wand, which acts as an indirect upgrade to the Totem Collar from pre-hard mode. Like the Totem Collar, it also features 4 separate sentries, each with their own attacks, but unlike the Totem Collar, there's really only one worth using, that being the Purple Buster Totem, which releases a slow orb that explodes upon contact with an enemy, damaging anything within its range. Compared to the other attacks, this one is much more damaging, and for now it's likely your best option against bosses. There's also a few accessory upgrades you can get from the dungeon now, such as the Holy Aegis that combines the effects of the Paladin Shield and Cross Necklace, or if you want a dash, you can go for the Master Ninja Gear. After grabbing whatever upgrades you want, craft some Aqua Potions for uninhibited water movement, and then head to the aquatic depths. Here, you'll want to carve out a moderately sized arena to take on the Forgotten One, which you can literally just circle for the entire fight. Provided your Aqua Potion doesn't run out, that is. If it doesn't, you should be able to take down the Forgotten One as many times as it takes to get the Incubator, a sentry that acts very similar to the Queen Spider Staff from Vanilla, summoning little crabs over time that swarm nearby enemies. Sadly, the crabs have very limited vertical mobility and can't fall through platforms, making it quite difficult to use against bosses. In my testing against Duke Fishron, the Rude Wand dealt more consistent damage, so still remains the number 1 pick. If you're not as confident with the Duke fight, then feel free to skip to Golem, as other than the Shrimpy Truffle, it doesn't unlock much. You shouldn't have much problem with Golem itself. In fact, I realised pretty quickly that with the Morale Banner and the Airstrike Shield, you can literally just tank the entire fight. So if you're looking for a specific drop or even just some gold, this is a good boss to farm. If you're following this playthrough in real time, then at this point you want to jump in your time machine and go back to before defeating Golem. This will let you farm up enough Defender medals to buy the highest tier of Old One's army sentries. If your time machine isn't working, however, you'll just have to fight through the event with the last tier of sentries, and good luck against Betsy with those. Hopefully after another 1 or 2 underpowered fights, you'll have enough Defender medals now to get a new sentry. So add another platform to fight Betsy and give the event another go. And then another one, but make sure not to die this time. Within Betsy's treasure bag you should find even more Defender medals, allowing you to purchase a full set of Valhalla armour to finally increase your sentry count for the first time since pre-hard mode. With all the right accessories equipped, you should now have a total of 10 sentry slots, so let's get you an even more powerful sentry to fill them. Before you get too excited though, I should disclose that this involves taking on the Martian invasion, a rather infuriating event to fight in Master Mode. What's worse is you'll likely need to do it quite a few times. What you're looking for has a 5% chance of dropping from Martian Engineers, and while these enemies aren't rare, chances are you won't get it on your first event. The silver lining is that you don't have to defeat the Martian Saucer at least, meaning you can safely die when fighting one. Well, as safe as you can be while dying, I guess. With enough deaths though, you should finally get the Volt module, a sentry weapon that summons a Martian turret to fire chain lightning at nearby enemies. Next, you'll want to log off for the night and immediately forget you have this until the final few seconds of the cultist fight the next play session. But at least you remembered in time for the pillars, which this thing is actually really good against. Before that though, you can now craft Terrarium cores thanks to the ancient manipulator dropped by the cultist, which allows you to make an excellent pair of boots and wings. If you're patient enough to farm for a frozen turtle shell too, you can craft the Terrarium Defender, a combination of the Ankh Shield, frozen turtle shell, Paladin Shield, and Cross Necklace. With that, it's time to take on the pillars, which will soon fall thanks to your new Volt module. When the final one goes down, all you can do is wait for the arrival of the Moonlord. The Moonlord is an interesting challenge in a sentry only run, as the usual strategy would be to run along a long sky bridge while shooting behind you. Then, whenever the death laser fires, you simply fly over the top and repeat in the other direction. When your only source of damage is sentries though, this is mostly out of the question. Instead, you'll need to stay very close to the Moonlord if you hope to deal any damage, which of course means taking a lot of damage yourself. The simple answer would be to invest in a very defensive, tanky loadout, dodging only the death laser and absorbing any other attacks. If you want to actually play the game a bit more actively though, the fight becomes a whole lot more difficult, and you'll need the right tools to get you through it. With all that farming for a frozen turtle shell, you should also hopefully have found a frozen key, allowing you to open the ice chest in the dungeon for the Staff of the Frost Hydra. While this may have lower damage than your other options, it has a pretty high range along with a fast projectile, making its damage a little more consistent against the Moonlord, and more specifically his Moonclots. It may still take a few attempts to take him down, but stay persistent with it and eventually you'll come out on top. The bad news is that you'll likely need to do this another few times to get one of the sentries the Moonlord drops. But the good news is that now you've proven you can do it legitimately, you can whack on a shiny stone and as many shields as you can carry to tank most of the Moonlord's attacks. The defensive loadout even ends up taking less time to defeat the Moonlord than your previous, more quote-unquote legitimate one, making your lasting lesson from this playthrough be that you should always take the easy way out and never engage in a fair fight. There's still one more boss to go though, so grab whichever sentry the Moonlord dropped and summon the Primordials. The Lunar Portal staff tends to be a bit better on this fight, but it's definitely doable with the Rainbow Crystal one. The first phase takes a page out of the Forgotten Ones book and decides to be a circle simulator, but the second phase definitely ramps things up a bit. The attacks are all well telegraphed and very punishing to get hit by, but thanks to the massive damage of your sentries, the fight doesn't last long, and the final boss of the Thorium mod falls. There is a new sentry and armor set you can craft from its drops, but sadly there's nothing really to use these against. So for now, I want to say a massive thank you to my patrons shown on screen for supporting the channel. If you like what you see and want to see more of it, then you can join my Patreon using the link in the description below. If you enjoyed this video and haven't seen my sentry only playthroughs in either vanilla or the Calamity mod, then I'd recommend checking them out next. Either way, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.